My daughter said, "We've handled everything, just focus on getting better." But I found out she sold my home. People say mornings are peaceful when you retire. They lie. At 77, mornings are loud in their own way. The knees creak. The coffee maker sputters like it's ready to quit, and your body feels like a machine someone forgot to oil last winter. But I get up anyway, because this old house won't keep itself alive, and because routine is the last armor I have left. My name is Alvin Prescott. I live in Ann Arbor, Michigan, in a tall Victorian house that I once promised my late wife Margot I'd never sell. She loved this house, the wraparound porch, the creaky staircase, the way the cherry trees bloomed out front every May, like it was showing off just for her. She passed 5 years ago. Breast cancer. Quietly, bravely, the way she lived. Since then, it's just been me, this house, and a stubborn orange cat named Professor who ignores me until it's time for dinner. That's okay. I've learned to appreciate silence. It doesn't argue. It doesn't disappoint you. This morning I got up just after 6, same time as always. My back wasn't happy about it, but we made a deal a few decades ago. It complains, I ignore it. I stood at the window facing the garden. The lilac bush was already wilting, but the birds were still singing like they hadn't read the news. I boiled the kettle, poured my tea. No sugar. Margot hated sugar. I still drink it her way. I still sit in the same chair she used to read in. Some habits, I guess, are how you keep ghosts company. The phone was quiet. No missed calls. My daughter Diana hadn't called in 2 weeks. That wasn't unusual. Not since she married Simon. I still remember the first time I met him. Slick hair, shiny smile, and a handshake that felt like it was calculating my net worth. He wasn't bad looking or rude exactly, but something in his eyes said, I know how to get what I want. I never liked that look. It reminded me of students who plagiarized and smiled when you caught them. Diana saw something else in him. He listens to me, she used to say. And maybe that's true. Maybe I never listened enough. Maybe I was too busy teaching, writing, earning, fixing the roof, doing what I thought a good father did. But somewhere along the line, the girl who used to sit on my lap and ask about Greek mythology stopped seeing me as dad and started seeing me as a walking checkbook. Last year, she started hinting about the house. Dad, it's too big for you. That staircase is a death trap. What if something happens and no one's there? I told her I was fine. That I had Tom next door, a retired nurse who checked on me every other day. That I had my routine, my books, and my health. But what I didn't say, what I couldn't say, was that I didn't want to leave because this house is the last thing in this world that still feels like us. Like me and Margot. That was the last proper conversation we had. This morning after breakfast, I went to the study, a sunlit little room in the back, where I still try to write even though the words come slower these days. I bent down to pick up a pen that had rolled under the desk, and that's when it hit me, a strange wave, like the room had shifted sideways. Then came the pain in my shoulder, dull but sharp enough to make my breath catch. My fingers tingled, the left side of my face felt numb. I tried to call out for Professor, ridiculous as that sounds, but no words came out. I reached for the phone. My arm wouldn't obey. I don't remember much after that. Only the faint sound of my neighbor Tom calling my name from the porch, the creak of the screen door opening, and then everything went dark. When I woke up, the ceiling was white, the air smelled like antiseptic, and a machine beside me beeped like a ticking clock. A nurse noticed I was awake and came over. Her voice was kind. Her name was Elena. She said I'd had a mild stroke, that I was lucky Tom found me when he did, that recovery was possible, that I needed to rest. That's when the phone rang. It was Diana. And the first thing she said wasn't, "How are you, Dad?" or "I'm coming right away." It was this, "Dad, everything's okay now. We've handled everything for you. The house is taken care of. The car too. Just focus on getting better." I stared at the ceiling, stunned. The house, the car handled. I wanted to believe I misheard her. That maybe the stroke had muddled my brain, scrambled my ears, translated her words into nonsense. So I asked, my voice slow and thick like wet cement handled what? "Does that mean?" Diana's voice on the other end was smooth. Too smooth. "It means you don't need to worry anymore, Dad. Simon and I, well, we thought long and hard, and we decided it was time. You can't go back to living alone in that big old place. We've been telling you that for years. This stroke just proves it." So we took action. I gripped the hospital blanket like it might anchor me to reality. "Action," I said, struggling to pronounce the word. She hesitated only for a breath, and then dropped the bomb with cheerful finality. "We sold the house, Dad. And the Lincoln, too. Got a great deal. Honestly, the market's hot right now, and we didn't want to lose momentum." I couldn't speak. My tongue pressed against the roof of my mouth, but nothing came out except a low groan. "Don't get upset," she said quickly. "Listen, we found you a place at Heron Crest, that beautiful assisted living facility near Brighton. It's got everything on site, nurses, community events, even a lake view. The deposit's already paid, and we used part of the proceeds to secure the best unit." My heart began pounding harder than it had in years. "You sold without..." I gasped. The words came in broken fragments as if my own body couldn't keep up with the rage boiling inside me. "Dad, you were incapacitated. Someone had to make a decision. We couldn't wait. You had..." "No." "Right." She sighed, and I could hear the shift in her tone from falsely sweet to patronizing. "We're your family. Your only family. Of course we had a right. You wouldn't listen before, so we did what's best. For you." There it was, the line that every manipulator eventually uses. "For your own good." The kindest phrase ever weaponized. I tried to sit up, but the IV tugged at my arm, and a nurse rushed in. "Mr. Prescott, please, you need to stay still." I waved her off weakly and turned back to the phone. "Contracts," I forced out. "No. Power." "Oh, come on, Dad," Diana said, her voice hardening. "You really want to start talking about paperwork? You raised me in that house. You always said it would be mine someday. We just expedited the process." Expedited. She said it like this was a shipping order, not a life she had bulldozed. "Who signed?" I demanded. "You had an old power of attorney in place, we used that." Now I knew she was lying. I had rescinded that document a year ago with my lawyer Gerald Klein, after Simon started sniffing around with business ideas and equity opportunities. I had protected myself. Or so I thought. "Illegal," I muttered. "Don't be dramatic," Diana snapped. "It's done, and frankly, it's time. You're not 25 anymore. You had a stroke. You can't live alone. Simon and I are taking care of everything." She paused, then added too casually, "Oh, and we've moved some of your things already. Don't worry, just personal stuff. A few family heirlooms." Mom's quilt, your old Navy watch, some photos. My breath caught. The Navy watch. Margot gave it to me the year we were married. It belonged to her father, a World War II veteran. I'd promised to pass it on to a grandson one day. It wasn't just a watch. It was history. Legacy. Her legacy. And now it was in a box, probably on its way to some pawn shop or some locked drawer in Simon's office. You stole. No one stole anything, she barked. We're your family. What's yours is. I ended the call. My hand trembled. I felt every inch of my age and none of the dignity I had built over a lifetime. A stroke had weakened my body, but it was betrayal that crushed my spirit. The nurse came back in frowning. Mr. Prescott, your vitals are spiking. You need to calm down. But how do you calm down when your own child ransacks your life while you're unconscious? I lay back silent, staring at the ceiling tiles. They blurred and reformed like puzzle pieces I couldn't fit together. How long had Diana been planning this? Was it Simon's idea or hers? Or maybe it didn't matter. The result was the same. They had taken the one place in the world that still felt like Margot. They had sold my car, my books, my watch, and all without blinking. And they thought I would just lie here and accept it. No, not this time. I would fight. With whatever strength I had left, I would take back what was mine, not just the bricks and beams, but the principle, the right to live my own life. I reached for the call button slowly, shakily, and pressed it. The nurse reappeared. Yes, Mr. Prescott. My voice was thin but clear. Call Gerald Klein. Now. She blinked. Your lawyer, I nodded. I'll let him know. As she left the room, I closed my eyes. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of something else. And if Diana thought I'd go quietly, she didn't know her father at all. By the time Gerald Klein walked into my hospital room the next morning, I had spent most of the night awake, not from the stroke, not from the discomfort of IV lines or hospital mattresses, but from one simple, devastating thought. She didn't even ask. She didn't ask me if I wanted to sell the house. She didn't ask if I was ready to move. She didn't ask what mattered to me. She just assumed I'd be too weak, too tired, too slow to fight back. She was wrong. Alvin Gerald greeted, brushing snow off his coat sleeves. You're a hard man to get a hold of these days. Stroke and real estate drama? Are you trying to win some kind of elder abuse bingo? I almost smiled. That was Gerald. Dry wit, steady nerves, and a brain like a steel trap. We'd been friends since undergrad. He went into law, I went into history, and we'd stayed close even after our careers split us geographically. Glad you came, I said, still fumbling with the slower rhythm of speech therapy. He pulled up a chair, opened his briefcase, and gave me the same look he used to give students he caught copying footnotes, a mix of disappointment and quiet anger. Talk to me, he said. Everything. No holding back. I told him what Diana had said on the phone. The house sold, the car gone, the watch missing, a spot in some facility in Brighton paid for without my consent. I had to pause often, but Gerald listened with a patience only true friends possess. When I finished, he opened his notebook and started writing rapidly. The power of attorney, he asked, the one we revoked last year. Do you still remember where the updated paperwork is? Safe, I said. Study. Behind Tolstoy. He smirked. You and your secret compartments. I shrugged, or tried to. I'll have someone from my office retrieve the documents today. You sure Diana doesn't have a copy of the old one? No. Then I added, she thinks she does. Gerald's jaw tightened. If she used forged or expired paperwork to conduct that sale, this isn't just immoral, it's criminal. Fraud, misrepresentation of ownership, misappropriation of funds, possibly even elder abuse if we push it. I closed my eyes for a moment. The words sounded distant even as they concerned my life. My daughter. He tapped his pen on the pad. Do you want to press charges? I didn't answer right away. Not because I was unsure, but because even now something inside me still hoped Diana would come to her senses, that she'd show up in this room and say, I made a mistake, Dad. I panicked. I'll fix it. But deep down, I knew she wouldn't. Gerald must have sensed my hesitation. Let's do this first, he said. We'll contact the Register of Deeds, the Realtor's office, and run a title search. If the transaction's been recorded, we'll find out who bought your house and whether the sale has cleared or is still pending. I'll also request the sales contract and see who signed it and under what authority. I nodded. He closed the notebook and looked me square in the eye. Alvin, you've built a hell of a life. That house, your car, your keepsakes. None of that should have been touched without your consent. What Diana and Simon did, it's serious. Are you ready for what comes next? A long pause. Then I said I was never a perfect father, Gerald. But I never stole from my kid. He placed his hand on my forearm. And now your kid's stealing from you. Silence. Then I asked, You think she's done this before? Gerald looked grim. You said she used the term, handled everything. That tells me she wasn't improvising. This was planned. I felt it in my bones. This wasn't a rash move. It was orchestrated piece by piece. They'd waited for the right moment for my health to fail, for my voice to go quiet, for the old man to lie still and accept whatever they handed him. But they forgot who raised them. They forgot what I taught in lecture halls for 40 years, how to read patterns, how to detect lies, how to track the truth through centuries of dust and distortion. They thought I was easy to erase. I wasn't. By Monday afternoon, Gerald returned to the hospital with a thick folder under his arm and a look that told me everything before he even opened his mouth. It's worse than we thought, he said, pulling up a chair. He laid out the documents carefully on the tray table beside me. Title searches, printouts of e-signatures, realtor communications, a notarized bill of sale. Diana and Simon used a revoked power of attorney, the one we canceled last July, and somehow convinced a notary to verify her signature as valid. The buyer, a young couple from Chelsea, the Marises, newly married. They thought they were buying the home of a retired professor looking to downsize. The deposit's been paid. Closing is scheduled for next week. I clenched my good fist. Do they know the truth? They will, Gerald said grimly. I've already left a message with their lawyer, but if the sale closes before we file a formal injunction, it could get messy, costly. We have to move fast. What about the car? I asked. He flipped to another page. Sold last Thursday. An antique dealer in Lansing picked it up, paid $27,000 cash. Said Diana claimed it was hers inheritance from her father who had taken ill. He made air quotes with his fingers. We might be able to recover it if we act fast, but it depends on whether it's already been resold. The room felt smaller. The beeping machines felt louder. And the watch, I asked, already knowing the answer. Gone, Gerald confirmed. Sold at an auction house in Detroit over the weekend. Valued at over 10 grand. It was under your name appraised last year. But Diana claimed it was hers, a family item passed down from her mother. I couldn't breathe for a second. Not because of the stroke, not because of the numbers, but because of the absolute finality of that sentence, gone. Margot's watch. A timepiece passed down through generations, reduced to a line on a ledger and a few thousand in cash. I'm sorry, Gerald said quietly. I nodded, blinking hard. It's not about the money. I know, he said. It never is. There was a long pause. Then I looked at him. Do it. Do what? Everything, I said. File the injunction. Contact the Marises. Freeze the title. Report the fraud. All of it. Gerald met my eyes. You sure once we go down this road, Diana's going to be in real legal trouble? She already is, I said. I just want the truth to catch up with her. He closed the folder and nodded. All right, we'll move. He stood to leave, but I stopped him. Gerald, yeah. If she calls, don't answer. He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. That night, I couldn't sleep. The hospital was quiet except for the occasional murmur from the nurses' station and the distant sound of someone coughing down the hall. I stared at the ceiling and remembered Diana as a girl, messy curls, chocolate-stained hands, asking if the stars were holes poked in the sky. How did we get here? Was it when Margot passed, and I didn't know how to comfort her? Was it all the times I chose work over dinner? Was it me? Or was it something I couldn't have changed, no matter how hard I tried? I closed my eyes and prayed not for forgiveness, not for peace, just for clarity. Clarity to know I wasn't acting out of revenge. Clarity to remember that this was about dignity. Mine. And if this was what it took to reclaim it, so be it. The next morning, Gerald returned with news. I spoke to the Marises, he said, sitting beside my bed. They were horrified. The wife cried. Apparently, they'd already started imagining where the nursery would go. But when they saw the revoked documents and the camera footage, yes, thank God for your discreet security system, they agreed to cancel the deal. I exhaled slowly. What? About the deposit. They'll want it back $75,000. Diana already spent most of it. That's our next problem. Simon, I asked. Gerald nodded. He's ducking calls, probably trying to cover his tracks. But they're running out of room. If we file a civil case this week, we'll also have grounds for criminal fraud. And the police, they're aware. I spoke with a detective named Harris. He wants to speak with you directly tomorrow. They're taking it seriously. I felt a knot loosen in my chest. Not because I wanted to see Diana in cuffs, but because for the first time in days, someone was listening, believing, acting. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about a man, an old man, yes, but not a powerless one saying, "You don't get to erase me. Not while I'm still here." The nurse knocked gently before opening the door. "Mr. Prescott, your daughter is here." I turned my head slowly. Diana. I had rehearsed this moment in my head all night. Every word, every pause, every breath I would take before speaking. But when she stepped into the room, those thoughts scattered like dry leaves in wind. She looked tired. No, not tired, calculated. like someone trying to look tired enough to earn sympathy but not disheveled enough to lose control. Her coat was perfectly buttoned. Her lips pursed in a way that said, "This is all a misunderstanding." "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice soft, too soft. I didn't respond right away. I just watched her. She moved to the chair beside my bed and sat down carefully, as if we were strangers on a first date. "I heard you've been making a fuss," she said with a small, forced laugh. "Calling lawyers, detectives. Gerald even reached out to the buyers. Still, I said nothing." She adjusted the sleeve of her coat. A nervous tell. She used to do the same thing as a child when caught sneaking cookies from the jar. "Dad," she said again, firmer now. "You're not thinking clearly. You've just had a stroke. You shouldn't be making legal decisions in this state." That did it. "I'm thinking clearer than ever," I said slowly, every word sharp like gravel in my throat. She blinked. "You can talk surprise," I said, and sat up straighter. "Dad, listen," she started, but I raised a hand. A gesture I'd used 100 times in the classroom. It still worked. "I listened," I said, "for years. I listened to every excuse, every request. Every time you said Simon just needed a little help. Every time you said this time it would be different." She looked away. "You were never there for me." There it was, the old wound, always waiting to be reopened. "You think selling my house erases that?" I asked. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," she said, eyes glistening now. "I was going to explain everything once you were better." "No," I said, voice steady. "You weren't. You were hoping I wouldn't recover, or at least not enough to fight back." Her mouth fell open. "How can you say that?" "Because I know you, Diana," I replied. "Better than you think. And I know Simon's fingerprints are all over this too." She stiffened at his name. "He's my husband. He's trying to build something. We're in debt, Dad. The kids' tuition, the mortgage, medical bills." I raised a hand again. "You stole from me," I said. "And you lied. You used a revoked document. You moved my things. You sold my wife's watch." Her lip trembled. "You don't understand what it's like." "I understand betrayal," I said. She looked down at her lap. "We were desperate. You made me desperate," I snapped. Lying in this bed, not knowing if I'd ever speak again. And while I was fighting for breath, you were emptying my life into bank accounts and real estate listings. She finally looked up. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far. Simon said it was the only way." "No," I said quietly. "It was the easiest way. Not the only one." The silence between us thickened like smoke. Then I asked her something I hadn't planned. "Why didn't you just ask me for help?" She stared at me, and for the first time in many years I saw something that resembled the daughter I once knew. The little girl who asked me about dinosaurs, who made me tiny cards with crayons on Father's Day, and then it was gone. "I didn't think you would say yes," she whispered. "I would have," I said, "if you had come to me with honesty. But you never say yes," she said bitterly. "You always make us feel like we have to earn everything." "Because you do," I said. Her tears turned to anger in an instant. "So this is punishment. You're going to let your only daughter go to prison to prove a point. I'm going to let the truth prove a point," I said. "You just decided which side of it you're on. Diana stood up, pacing a few feet from the bed, arms crossed tightly across her chest. "You always did this," she muttered. "You put everything into your work, your principles, your precious ethics. But when it came to me, your only child, you never bent, never gave." I watched her quietly. She wasn't talking to me now, not really. She was talking to a version of me she'd built in her head, one she could blame for every shortcoming in her life. "Do you think it was easy?" she went on. "Watching you pour everything into your students, your books, your lecture halls, while I got whatever scraps were left. At the end of the day, I was building a future," I said softly. "For who?" She snapped. "Because it wasn't for me." I let that hang in the air. And then calmly, I said, "I gave you a debt-free college education. I helped with your down payment. I paid for private school for the kids. I replaced the car when Simon wrecked the first one. But I couldn't fill whatever hole you kept digging inside yourself." She froze. And for a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, something I said had landed. But instead, she turned, her voice quivering between defiance and desperation. "I can fix this. Just give me time." "You had time," I replied, "and you used it to sell the only home I ever built while I was lying half paralyzed in a hospital bed." She stepped closer. "I'll get the money back. We'll return everything. I'll talk to the buyers. You already signed the contracts," I interrupted, "and spent the deposit. We'll sell our house," she said quickly. "Or Simon's car. Or the police are already involved," I said. Her face went pale. "You called the police." "I had to," I said. "Because this isn't just a family disagreement. It's fraud, theft, exploitation." She slumped into the chair again, covering her face with both hands. "Dad, please," she whispered. "You're the only person who can stop this." "No," I said gently. "Only you can." She looked up, eyes red, shoulders trembling. "What do you want me to do?" I leaned forward, gathering what strength I had left. My voice was quiet, but ironclad. "3 things. 1, return every cent to the Marises, the car buyer, the auction house if you can. 2, bring back everything you took from the house. No excuses. 3, sign a legal agreement relinquishing any claim to my estate. In writing. With Gerald present." Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked stunned. "Dad, you do that," I continued, "and I won't press charges." She stared at me. "You'd really do that? You'd send your daughter to prison?" I met her gaze. "I didn't sell my daughter's soul. She did that herself." Silence. Then bitterly she muttered, "You never loved me." "I loved you more than you'll ever understand." I said the words heavy with grief. "I still do. That's why this hurts." She stood up, brushing the tears off her cheek in one violent motion. "You'll die alone in that damn house," she hissed. "And no one will care." I nodded. "I'd rather die with integrity than live surrounded by thieves." She stormed out, heels clicking against the tile floor. The door swung shut behind her. And just like that, the room was quiet again. I leaned back against the pillow. The rage and ache in my chest slowly gave way to something else. Not relief, not sadness, something colder. Resolution. I don't know what broke my heart more, the betrayal or the way Diana didn't even flinch when faced with what she'd done. Not really. She came to make a deal, not to apologize. She came to negotiate with someone she thought was still too weak to say no. But this time I said no. And it may have cost me my daughter for good. But if I've learned anything in these late years, it's this. Sometimes love means letting someone fall hard enough to hear the truth when they hit the ground. Even if it breaks your own bones in the process. 2 days passed without a word. No calls, no texts, no hospital visits. Just silence. A silence that wasn't absence, but avoidance. I knew Diana well enough to recognize the pattern when backed into a corner. She didn't face things. She disappeared from them. She let Simon handle the mess while she clung to the illusion that none of it was her fault. But I didn't expect this. On the morning of the third day, Gerald returned to my hospital room, his face grave suit slightly wrinkled, as if he hadn't slept. Behind him was Detective Harris, the fraud investigator assigned to the case. He carried a manila folder and a look that made the pit of my stomach twist before anyone even spoke. "Alvin," Gerald said, sitting down beside me, "we have a problem." I already knew. "Tell me," I said. Harris cleared his throat. "We sent officers to Diana's home this morning. She was scheduled to appear for a follow-up statement. They never showed." He opened the folder and placed several photographs on the table. Neighbors reported seeing Diana, Simon, and their 2 kids leaving the house yesterday morning. Suitcases, backpacks. They told people they were visiting family in Indiana. But we checked, no one there has seen or heard from them. "They ran," I said flatly. Gerald nodded. "That's our assumption." Diana emptied 3 accounts the night before. Roughly $126,000 withdrawn in cash. Simon sold his car to a buyer in Toledo for cash as well. No record of the funds being deposited anywhere. I exhaled slowly. "What about the children?" "They're with them," Harris said, confirmed by school records. Both kids were marked absent since Thursday. No calls from parents. The school assumed illness. We think they're using fake identities or traveling under the radar, possibly heading south, maybe Mexico. I closed my eyes. I wasn't shocked. I was ashamed that part of me still hoped for better. "Can you find them?" I asked. "We've issued a BOLO, be on the lookout across state lines," Harris said. "We've contacted TSA, local authorities, Border Patrol. If they try to leave the country under their real names, we'll know. But if they use fake IDs or avoid airports, it'll take longer." How much longer? He hesitated. "Could be days. Could be months." I nodded. And then asked the only question that truly mattered to me in that moment. "Are the grandchildren safe?" Gerald and Harris exchanged a look. Then Harris answered carefully. "As far as we can tell, yes. There's no record of abuse or neglect. But we'll be watching closely if and when they're located." "Good," I said, my voice quieter than I intended. The shame of having to ask that question about your own daughter cuts deeper than any stroke. Gerald reached over and rested his hand on my arm. "We'll keep pursuing this, Alvin. But I need to be honest. The odds of recovering the money are slim. Especially if they've gone overseas. And your daughter could face multiple felony charges." I turned to the window, where spring sunlight spilled over the hospital lawn. A robin hopped near a daffodil bloom, a simple, stupidly beautiful thing. "She's already lost more than she knows," I said. There was silence in the room. Not awkward, just full. Like a moment of prayer no one wanted to break. That afternoon, Gerald and I began drafting the next steps. He would petition the court to fully revoke any rights Diana might claim over my estate, present or future. He would contact the buyer of my antique car, hoping it hadn't been resold yet. He would initiate the legal foundation for a trust one that bypassed Diana entirely and ensured that Oliver and Ellie, my two grandchildren, would still have a future. Even if their mother didn't. And me. I asked the nurse for a whiteboard and a marker. And with shaky fingers, I began to write down the names of every item that had been taken from my house. Not because I expected to recover them, but because I refused to forget. I wouldn't let memory be another thing Diana stole from me. The next 3 days moved both too fast and unbearably slow. Every morning a nurse helped me into the wheelchair and wheeled me outside for fresh air. I'd sit under the maple tree just beyond the parking lot, watching the breeze stir the new green leaves and pretending for a few moments that life hadn't been turned upside down. Inside, the real work continued. Gerald was a constant presence, phone pressed to his ear folders, always in hand notes, scribbled in his tight, slanted handwriting. He met with the probate clerk, submitted our petition for emergency estate protection, and made sure every document Diana had ever touched was now legally void. He even reached out to the antique dealer in Lansing. She sold the car to a collector in Illinois, he reported one afternoon. But, and here's the good part, that buyer was a retired Army captain. When he found out it was stolen property, he returned it without argument. I smiled genuinely for the first time in what felt like weeks. There's still honor in the world, I said. Not everywhere, Gerald replied. But enough. The Lincoln would be transported back to a secured garage under my name. The watch, unfortunately, was gone for good. Resold at auction provenance, now legally entangled. But the memory of it that Diana couldn't take. The Marises, the young couple nearly defrauded by the house sale, came to visit. I don't know what to say, the husband Jamie told me, eyes wide with gratitude and fatigue. We didn't know. We thought we were just buying a place to raise our girls. You were, I said. You just knocked on the wrong door at the right time. I wrote them a check to return their full deposit, $75,000. It wasn't legally required, Gerald had warned me, but I did it anyway, because I knew how it felt to have something stolen. They tried to refuse it, but I insisted. I'm not doing this for you, I said gently. I'm doing it for me. And then came the final decision, the one I had put off until I could sit upright and speak clearly again. Gerald brought in the papers, the new will, the trust documents. I can put everything into your name alone, he said. Leave it all to charity, or friends, or whoever you want. No, I said. I looked down at the document. I had crossed out Diana Prescott entirely. There was no hesitation, no emotion left to examine. But in place of her name, I wrote to Oliver and Eleanor Prescott, my grandchildren, to be held in trust until they turned 25, to be overseen by an independent trustee appointed by the court, to be protected even from their parents if necessary. They're not to blame, I said. They didn't ask for this. Gerald nodded. It's a clean cut. It has to be, I replied. Because this time, I wouldn't leave the door half open, hoping someone would walk back in. That evening, just before sunset, I sat by the window with a cup of lukewarm tea. No more hospital monitors. No more IVs. I was due for discharge the next morning. My strength wasn't what it used to be, but my resolve stronger than ever. I pulled out a worn envelope I kept tucked inside a novel. Inside was a photograph faded at the edges of Margot holding Diana as a toddler on the porch of the very house that now stood empty. I studied their faces. What happened? Where did that bright-eyed child go? Maybe I failed her. Maybe the world got to her first. But no matter the answer, I knew one thing: I would not fail myself again. I would not let shame or guilt or regret decide what happened to the rest of my life. That power finally and fully was mine. The day I left the hospital, spring had fully arrived. The dogwoods were blooming along the sidewalks in Ann Arbor, their white petals fluttering like small flags of surrender. The air smelled of cut grass and damp earth. I hadn't breathed deeply in weeks, but that morning I did. Gerald came to pick me up. Not a nurse, not an ambulance, not Diana. I had no one else. And strangely, that felt less lonely than it used to. "I hope you're ready," he said, helping me into the passenger seat of his old Volvo. I found someone to help pack the house. Discreet, trustworthy, doesn't ask questions. "I'm not packing," I said, fastening my seatbelt slowly. "I'm walking through." He nodded, understanding, without asking for explanation. We drove in silence. The streets of the University District passed by like memories cafes, where I'd once met students for office hours crosswalks, where I'd waited holding Margot's hand bookstores, long since replaced by smoothie shops. When we turned onto Holcomb Street, my breath caught. There it was, the house I built, with my own 2 hands, 42 years ago. Still standing. Still mine. But not for much longer. Gerald unlocked the door, stepping aside. "I'll wait outside," he said. I nodded and entered alone. The air inside smelled faintly of lemon oil and dust. The sunlight filtered through the curtains in that familiar golden way it always had around 4 o'clock. For a moment, it felt like nothing had changed. Like Margot would come down the stairs asking where I left the pruning shears. Like Diana would appear in the hallway asking for more orange slices before ballet. But the silence told the truth. The living room was tidy but hollow. The mantelpiece, once home to photos, candlesticks, and the old Navy watch, now bore only empty outlines on the dust. In the kitchen, the calendar was still turned to March, frozen on the week I'd had the stroke. I walked slowly, taking it all in. I wasn't looking for things to take with me. I was saying goodbye. In the study, I opened the drawer where I had kept my notes, unfinished lectures, half-written essays, letters never sent. I left them. Not out of bitterness, but because they belonged to another life. Upstairs, the bedrooms stood like silent witnesses. Diana's old room still had a faded poster on the wall, a constellation chart. I used to lie next to her and name the stars when she couldn't sleep. I'd almost forgotten that. I sat on the edge of the bed, running my hand along the worn quilt. "I tried," I said aloud. To no one in particular. I really did. There was no answer, just the groan of old wood settling. When I returned downstairs, I carried only one thing, a single framed photo, Margot and me on our 25th anniversary, laughing in the backyard with tomato stains on our shirts. She was holding a pie. I was holding her waist. Neither of us had any idea how fast the world would shift. Gerald stood at the bottom of the porch steps, arms crossed. "You ready?" he asked. I looked back one last time. Not with sorrow, but with something that surprised even me. Relief. "Yes," I said. "Let's go home." Not back home. Forward home. We drove north for a little over 2 hours, leaving behind the busy streets of Ann Arbor and its thick pockets of memory. As the landscape changed from city grids to rolling hills to winding forest roads, I could feel something loosening inside me like a knot gently coming undone. The house Gerald had found was small, simple, and perfect. A white cottage by Lake Charlevoix nestled among birch and pine. There was a dock, a bench facing west, and a wide porch with creaky floorboards that sang under your feet. No grand staircases, no memories pressed into the walls, just possibility. A local woman named Nora, about my age, came by the next morning to help with groceries and light housekeeping. She didn't ask questions. She didn't look at me like a man who needed pity. Just respect and a thermos of homemade soup. I liked her instantly. By the end of the first week, I'd already slipped into a rhythm I hadn't known I was craving. Mornings with black coffee and birdsong. Afternoons with books, walks to the dock, or writing thoughts that had waited too long. Evenings with the lake turning to gold, and my breath finally moving without tightness. I wasn't recovering anymore. I was becoming. Becoming the man I might have been if I hadn't spent so long measuring my worth by how much I could give to people who were only taking. One evening, as the sun dipped low and the water turned still, I sat on the porch with a journal open in my lap. The page was blank, but for once that didn't feel empty. It felt like space. Space to begin again. Just as I started writing, not a memoir, not a lecture, just thoughts, the mail truck pulled up. Nora brought me a small envelope. No return address. Postmark somewhere in southern Texas. Inside was a folded postcard. On the front, a beach. The kind with cheap umbrellas and too blue water. On the back, just 7 words. We're safe. The kids ask about you. No signature, but I didn't need one. Ellie, the younger of the two. Barely 9. The one who always hugged longer. Who brought me rocks from the yard and said they were treasures. I stared at the handwriting, a little wobbly, but hers. No apology, no explanation. Just a signal from far away that someone still remembered. I set the postcard down beside my tea, and I smiled. Not because everything was fixed, but because not everything had been lost. That night, Gerald came up for a visit, bringing a bottle of scotch and news from the private investigator. Still no solid leads on Diana and Simon, but nothing alarming either. The trail had gone cold. I'm sorry, he said quietly. Don't be, I replied. Let them go. I already did. We toasted to quiet things, peace, privacy, and the freedom to not be needed by anyone. Weeks turned into months. The lake changed colors. The trees turned gold, then bare, then green again. I turned 78 and celebrated not with a party, but a long walk around the water, a slice of pie, and a note in my journal. Dignity isn't given, it's reclaimed. Sometimes people ask me, usually strangers on the dock or a clerk at the hardware store, you up here all alone? I just smile. Not alone. Not anymore. Not when you finally have your life back. Life stories don't always have to be grand or heroic. Sometimes the most powerful ones are quiet. Like an old man in a small white house sipping tea while watching the lake. A man who lost a daughter, found his courage, and discovered in the last third of life that you're never too old to start over. Not because someone gives you permission, but because you finally give it to yourself. That's the real ending, and the real beginning. Thank you for listening to this story from Brian's Story. If this story touched something in you, if it reminded you of your own journey of letting go, standing up, or starting over, then you already know it's never too late to reclaim your voice. Subscribe if you'd like to hear more true stories like this, quiet, powerful, and full of life. We're just getting started. Until next time, take care of yourself. You deserve it.